In
So the biggest thing that I always used to look at was where does it articulate with the ulna? And then from there, how do I see kind of what it would be on the outside? So we know that this is going to be the side that goes on your thumb. So that's kind of the pointed side. See if I can find a good picture. So I have my theory of what I think this is. I'm going to go check and make sure the answer is right. And then I'll tell you if it's right, then I can tell you how I came to that conclusion. So for 110, our answer here is, oh, things aren't loading on me. What's going on? Remember, guys, if you're here, oh, I didn't put it in the chat. Today is a Q&A session because you guys have your exam tomorrow. So any and all questions that you guys have, please, you're welcome to unmute yourself or put them in the chat, and then we'll kind of go through those. They're just questions related to your lab exam tomorrow. I'm kind of going over some bones right now, and then I'm just here for questions today. And then on Thursday, we will have our session on Unit 3. Sorry, I'm still waiting for this to load here. Okay, so this, I was right. I was correct in what I was thinking, so it's a right. So I'm going to show you how I got that for the radius. So when I'm looking at a radius, there was two main things that I always used to go by, and it's pretty helpful for looking at it and figuring it out. So for figuring out right and left on the radius, do you see on the bottom how there's a rough or bumpy side? And then do you see how if we flip it over, there's a smooth side? So I'm just going to zoom in so you can kind of see right here. Does everybody see how there's a smooth side versus on the other side, it's rough? The smooth side is going to go up on your wrist, like this part of your wrist here. And then this down portion here is going to go where your thumb is. So again, like I remember things weird. If the smooth side is up on your wrist, like the inside of your wrist, on the inside of your wrist, and the pointy black, I'm just going to say black, where the black is. The pointy part is on your thumb, then I can just rotate it and flip it until I figure out which side. And the reason is it articulates with the humerus, the radius, the ulna, it articulates with the ulna right here. So does that make sense? The smooth side is upwards, and this would go to your thumb. So if that's the case, this would be a right. Does that make sense? That's how I tell it apart. No lecture review today, only lab review, because you guys are still taking your lab exam tomorrow. So Thursday we will start our lecture content for the next unit. Left versus right fibula, superior articular process of sacrum, does it have a significant? So let's look at the fibula. So if we're looking at our fibula, I'm going to do the same thing. I'll make sure that I'm thinking correctly, and then I'll tell you. So this should be, the fibula should be really easy if I'm correct here. 116. Okay, so for the fibula, that's one of the easiest ones to tell left and right. If you look, where did it go? Okay, right here. Do you see how there's the, like we had talked about, the articular surface for the talus, and then the malleolar fossa? The side, if you hold the fibula in your hand, the side where the malleolar fossa is on, the side of the malleolar fossa is right or left. So meaning if I'm looking at the fibula and this part is pointing down, the malleolar fossa is on the right, so this is a right. Does that make sense? So if the malleolar fossa is on the right and this is pointing down and I'm holding it, that would be a right. So this fibula in this picture is a right because this is on the right. Does that make sense? Let's see. The pressure on lateral malleolus articular surfaces. Not entirely. Do you mean the articular surface for the talus that's right here versus the lateral malleolus that's on the outside? The lateral malleolus is the entire smooth part versus the articular surface for the talus is this part next to the malleolar fossa. Does that make sense? Okay. Refresher, superior articular process of sacrum. Does it have superior articular facet like vertebrae? Yes, it does. The sacrum has embedded in it a vertebrae basically at the top. So yes, it would have the superior articular process just like the vertebrae. It's a good question. Any other questions? And I'm still here, so you guys, if you're kind of looking through your notes or you're trying to think of something, that's fine. Like I had said, I'm only covering lab stuff today. Thursday morning, 9 to 11, we'll be going over lecture for Unit 3.
Can you show, like, I'm confused by the articular facet for the transverse process on the rib versus the tubercle, because in the book it looks like it's pointing to the same thing.
Sure. I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to look up look at it and then I'll make sure to say it right. Articular process for the rib. Can you repeat those for me?
Hold on one second. The articular facet for the transverse process of the rib.
Is that the one on the vertebrae?
Hold on, let me double check. Now I'm confusing myself.
Process for, that sounds like it's on the vertebrae. If it's
No, it's on, so on the, like, in the book, the blue book, on the page for the rib, it says number 10 is the articular facet for a transverse process, but in the picture it looks like
it articulates with a vertebrae.
Yeah.
Yes.
But is that the same spot as the tubercle? That's what I'm confused about, because it looks like it's in the same spot.
Oh, I see what you mean.
Sorry, I don't mean to cut in. That actually confused me when I was first doing it as well, but I looked on Google at all the pictures, and the articular facet for the bodies of vertebra is gonna be on the very tip on the dorsal extremity, and then for the transverse process, that's directly beneath the tubercle.
Okay.
There's a little flat part. If you Google it, there's parts where they'll color code it for you.
Okay. Yeah, it doesn't, because you can't, in the book it looks like it's pointing to the exact same thing.
Yeah.
So on our rib that we have here, 48 is our tubercle, which is the brown part. I will just tell you, I'm not going to say with 100% certainty, because I don't want to say with 100% certainty, but I'm almost positive that won't be on the test, the difference between when it on the test. Sometimes the things that are really out there like that, like the articular facet for articulating with the vertebrae, is not as important as a tubercle. So if those are two things that are almost in the same spot, like you're saying, we're wanting you to know the tubercle versus the facet. If you're on the test, this is just kind of an overall, honestly, tip for the exam. If you are on the exam and at any point, this happened to me, I can think of at least 2 or 3 times on my lab exam. If you're on the lab exam and you don't know what the question is asking for, because you could have 2 parts that are very close to each other, like on the vertebrae, raise your hand and ask Knutson to come over and say, okay, are you wanting the head of the rib? Like, for example, in this one, do you want the head of the rib or do you want, I think there's another term that goes, if I remember right, there's another structure that's right in that area. So do you want the neck, or what are you looking for right here? Because if you give him the two options of what it could be, it's very clear you're competent and you've studied. Does that make sense? You're not saying, hey, what is this? You're saying, hey, do you want this or this? Because it's obvious I've studied and I know those are both right there. Does that make sense? So if there's any confusion, just ask it like that.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I always ask lots of questions.
Me too. I don't remember, someone asked, do you remember which alternate names we need? I don't. I would just recommend knowing the alternate names for all of the ones on the feet and hand. I can't really tell you specifically if I don't remember specifically. I'm sorry. Yeah, talus, astragalus, that's one you would need to know. Tubercle of rib, holds it in. Can you go over level rib? What do you mean by that? Is that what you were asking, Alyssa? Level? Left versus right. Got it. So the biggest thing that I did with left versus right, so for this one, I'm like basically 100% sure this should be a right, but let's go make sure. Like I said, I don't want to say things incorrectly just in case, but it should be a right, and I'll show you. So it's a right. So when we look at the rib, basically two things. The rib is nice and easy. Hopefully you can see this groove right here. Yeah, the costal groove. And then we know that this cutoff part would be on the sternum. The costal groove goes down or towards your feet. So if this part is on the sternum, this goes towards your feet, and this is like goes around your rib cage. Picture the shape of your rib cage. Now picture turning this in your hand. You're going to put the black groove down towards your feet, and you're going to take that curve and follow the curve of your chest. Does that make sense? So that's why this is a right. The picture you see here is a right. Hopefully that explanation made sense. Again, you would take the cutoff portion and you would orient the black groove down, like in this picture, the black groove is hidden because this is a right. You have to, on the test, I definitely picked the rib up and I put it on my chest so that it made sense. As long as the costal groove is pointing down, the sternal is at your sternum, then you should be able to orient it along your rib cage. And obviously you don't want it turning outwards because that wouldn't make any sense to be on your rib cage and pointing outwards. Hopefully that's the way I'm saying that is making sense to everyone. Other questions?
I have a question. Do you know, okay, because I know you told us that the models were fill in the blank, but then Dr. Knudsen said that it was all multiple choice. And I feel like we've gotten different information from different people. Do you know for sure what it is?
Did Knudsen say it was multiple choice?
I asked him a while ago and he said that it was. I just feel like sometimes he likes to trick us. So I don't know. I just don't want to get there and like it be fill in the blank.
I don't. The thing about fill in the blank is it's better to be fill in the blank because it means that you're not tricked by the options. A year when I took the class, it was multiple choice on the bones, fill in the blank on the models. Then we transitioned multiple choice for the other two exams, Unit 3 exam and Unit 1 exam. But like a year ago, he told me that you guys were still doing this exam, the Unit 2 exam, like you guys had done it when I was taking the class, which is, like I said, multiple choice on the bones, fill in the blank. So I was going off of the last time he and I talked about this exam, which was a year ago, in terms of like, we don't always specifically talk about the makeup of the exam, you know, like it's not always something I'm talking to him about. So there's no like attempt to trick you here. I would imagine if he said it's multiple choice, there'd be no, I don't think he's ever like told people that it's multiple choice. If you get on there and it is fill in the blank, it's because he forgot that he didn't change it to multiple choice, not because he's trying to. So I'm trying to be as like straightforward and say like, I don't know. I think it should be fill in the blank because I don't think he ever changed it to multiple choice. If he's saying he did, it should be multiple choice. I just don't want you to get on there and then be really upset and be like, wait. Yeah. And so that's why. And honestly, like I really sincerely, he wouldn't have tried to lie to you. He just probably might have forgotten that.
Yeah, well, that's what I was thinking. And I do think some of the times I think it would be easier if it was fill in the blank, but for some reason for the models, I would rather have it be multiple choice. I don't know.
Yeah. I don't know. If he said it's multiple choice, it should be, but he might have been remembering, like I said, he converted the first exam and the third exam to multiple choice. So he might be forgetting that he didn't convert this exam to multiple choice.
Okay, because I was also thinking the Scantrons only have 100 questions, so he's either going to have to give us 2 or we're going to have to write in like A, B, C, D on the back.
Which is what I did when it was my class, we just wrote the numbers on the back.
Oh, so it was still like A, B, C, D, and just like you had to write in.
Oh, no. We had 2 Scantrons. And
okay.
On the back of the second Scantron, we wrote in the numbers for the question for the fill in the blank and then what our answer was. And I used the back of my first Scantron to write down my answer for the bones before I looked at the options.
Okay. Thank you.
Because I always got confused by looking at the choices. Are there any other types of questions on the exam? So again, the functions you would need to know, functions of white blood cells, including most common to least common, agranular, granular, right? You guys know that. I think I've said that multiple times. And then you would need to know ligamentum arteriosum versus ductus arteriosus.
I have a question on that. So is it going to be like a multiple choice question that says name like the structure and it's going to be like ligamentum arteriosum and then the next question is going to be like what's another name for it? Is that like how that's going to be structured?
I would definitely say we're getting into territory where I'm getting really close to giving you a question at that point. I would just say, look at the model, look at the ligamentum arteriosum, know what the difference is based upon your lecture notes between those two. So I don't know if I don't want to like, I'm not trying to be mean. I just don't know if I probably am getting into territory of like telling you exactly what's on the test at that point.
Okay.
Really supposed to do so.
Thanks.
Yeah, no problem. Other questions? Like I had said, just in case there's anybody that just came in, I'm just here today for questions. Oh, people asked stuff a while ago. Whoa, sorry, I didn't see any of these. The difference between optic canal and optic foramen. The optic canal, I believe, is the part that leads into the optic foramen. Optic foramen should be the actual hole. So optic canal should lead into the optic foramen. If anybody in here knows the answer to that, please feel free to chime in. I didn't see that until just now.
I have a quick question on that. So I know that a foramen is a hole in the bone. And when you look at the carotid canal on our skulls, it's like a hole. So it's a canal. So it looks like a foramen, but it's a canal. Same thing for the optic canal or optic foramen.
Isn't our optic canal starting by the eye and then we poke it through and then it goes in?
Yeah. It goes out to the,
Trying
I
to
think,
find
the
a
base
pic-
of the
Do you have a
skull.
picture of that? Trying to see if I have a picture of that anywhere here. The optic canal again should be the part where it goes in versus the foramen is the hole itself.
Okay.
Is that answering what you just said? I forget now what you said specifically because I was looking for carotid. You were talking about carotid canal versus carotid foramen, right?
Well, no, there is no carotid foramen. I was
There's
just
no
saying,
carotid canal.
or is there? No, I don't think there's a foramen for carotid, but no, I'm saying like a canal is not a hole. Or is it?
Bring up a good point. I don't know. I hadn't really, there is a definition page in the book. That's a good point. Does anybody in here know the answer to that? Is a foramen a canal? I'm not really sure that feels, I don't really.
I don't think that's on the exam, but I was just thinking about that right now. Because there's a couple canals, but like what some of them, like if like the hypoglossal canal that's by the foramen magnum, like on the skull that was inside the study center, it's like a hole, like it's a foramen. But then if you look at the carotid canal, it doesn't look like a hypoglossal canal. Do you know what I'm saying or no? Maybe I'm just confused.
Hearing what you're saying, I think that it's just that it's very detailed. I would say that a canal versus a foramen, I'm not sure if it really matters.
Yeah.
That it's talking about the hole. If anybody in here has looked into that and has a better answer for you, I guess I'm saying I don't really know. I don't think you need to know that, but I
Yeah.
don't really know the answer there. By the way, I saw Amy, I just saw your question about pedicle versus superior notch, and I'm trying to find the difference. The pedicle should be the part you can grab onto versus the superior notch, but let me look. I believe this black right here should be the superior notch versus the pedicle, but let me check. Oh, I got really close. You're asking about the difference between the pedicle and the superior notch. So 68 is pedicle, superior notch. I don't think I have a picture of superior notch on this practice exam. Purple. So my pedicle is okay. So pedicle should be the entire structure. Superior notch should be the actual like notch where it comes down. Does that make sense? A pedicle is the entire thing you could grab onto, basically, like the entire central part, versus the notch. The superior notch should be up top. I would imagine that would be the superior notch up here, unless
Okay.
there's superior notches there. I don't remember exactly where the arrow, was the arrow pointing down below or up here for superior notch?
It was because on the book, it shows like the front facing side, and it shows that the front is the pedicle. But then when it turned it to the side, like how this picture is, and then it's still pointed to the top, and it said that's also the superior notch.
Got it. I think the superior notch is literally referring to like the part where it curves. And I think
Okay.
the pedicle is the entire thing you could grab onto.
All right. Well, thank you.
And you might be able to see, again, like I don't have a bone right in front of me. You might actually be able to visually see a notch in here. I can't quite remember. Let me see if I can rotate it. If you can actually see a notch, then that's the notch they're talking about. But like the pedicle would be this thing, right? You're seeing that whole structure would be the pedicle, that whole entire like part you could wrap your finger around, versus a notch is like trying to be a little more on top. I think the notch is like this little part that like rotates, if I'm looking at it and seeing it, visualizing it right.
Got it. Thank you.
Yeah. Sorry, I didn't see your question. It got like buried in the chat. The carotid canal does not form a hole. The optic canal has the foramen next to it. So I'm assuming it is referring to the canal leading into the foramen. Yes. Okay, so Alyssa, thank you for clarifying. Yeah, so the canal is not a hole. The canal is something that either opens into a hole, so the optic canal opens into the optic foramen, or in the case of the carotid canal, now I'm seeing what you were trying to say earlier. In the case of the carotid canal, it's a closed off area. It doesn't ever lead into a foramen. It's a canal or just like a little opening.
So on our lab exam, we like, since that term specifically is the same thing, it says like optic canal and then has foramen in parentheses next to it. So if he like pointed to that specific area, do you think he would be like specific enough as to whether we would be able to identify the canal or whether it's a foramen?
So I think if it's because I know that with the canal, I know you can pass your stick through and it pokes through into the base of the skull. So if I was writing the exam, I would color in at the base of the skull to ask you for foramen. I would color in at the front of the skull, like by the eyeball, to ask you for canal. Does that make sense? That's what I would do. So if you're on the test and you get a question right by the skull, like, right by the eyeball, if that's the case, ask him if he wants foramen or canal, because that's where I would color it in to ask for canal. But because like you said, like, how do you tell the difference? For that part, you can't really tell. If you're in the base of the skull, at that point, it's not a canal and it's a foramen. Does that make sense?
Yeah, thank you.
So I would just basically clarify if you do specifically get that one. Other questions? So remember, Thursday, 9 to 11 a.m., we're going over Unit 3. I'm here until 6:45 today. If you guys have any questions for the lab exam tomorrow. Okay. And if you guys do need to go, you're welcome to go. If you want to stay and ask questions, that's fine too. Just write in the chat box if you need to leave, okay? Yeah, the anterior crest of the tibia, the fibula, and the interosseous border. So for the interosseous border, you're usually going to notice a more ridged or elevated ridge. So for this question, the interosseous border should be this brown line versus the, what did you say? Anterior crest would be orange, okay? So like I said, the interosseous border should be more elevated. So this brown should be the interosseous border. Let me go make sure before I steer you astray there. Sometimes I remember something incorrectly. So let's go up here, make sure. So yeah, so the brown, like I had said, is the interosseous border. When something is more raised, it's the interosseous border. So you can see here the brown is like really sharp versus this orange one is less sharp. Like if you ran your finger along it, it would not be as sharp. And so that's why that's the What did we say? The articular anterior crest of the fibula is the one that's less sharp.
Would that be the same for the tibia as well? I thought for the tibia, the bigger one is the crest.
Should be. Let's check that out. So because for the tibia, the anterior crest is going to be, okay, so it's kind of different because for the fibula, it's really hard to tell which is anterior, right? So that's why I go with like, what's the more ridged one? For the I can't even speak. For the tibia, if you look at it, this has to be the anterior crest. Does that make sense? Because this is pointing anterior. The interosseous border is going to be articulating with the fibula because it's inter, which means between, right? Interosseous, inter between the two bones. So if you look at let me see if I have a picture, the side of the tibia, it's not on this picture. So if we had a good picture that showed us that side of the tibia, basically on this other side, that should show us the interosseous border. Does that make sense? Because the interosseous border is going to be articulating or on the same side that articulates with the fibula.
Okay, so
Are you
I'm
asking
sorry.
about the border, the articulating surface of the tibia? Is that what you were talking about, the articulating surface? Articulating surface of the tibia is the part that's going to touch the fibula. So like, I'm trying to, it's kind of hard without like having all of this in person, but like, this is kind of where the fibia rests, right? I know that it looks a little funky, but this is how the fibia is, right? You have your medial malleolus here, and then your lateral malleolus out here, right? So what I'm saying is, if this here is the anterior part because it faces forward, which is anterior, right? Posterior is towards your butt, anterior is towards the front. This has to be the anterior crest because it's facing forward. The interosseous would be articulating or like in line sideways with the fibula. This part is not sideways, it's facing front. The sideways facing part is the interosseous border. Does that make more sense? Did I lose you? No, the medial malleolus does not have a malleolar fossa. The articulating surface of the tibia should be articulating with the talus at the bottom. Yes, so that would be at the very bottom of the tibia. Yes. Did I answer your question? I don't know if I lost you, but hopefully that makes sense. The anterior crest versus the interosseous border. Okay. Other questions? All right, I'm gonna go ahead and stop share here.